What am I doing? All right, that is much better. I was feeling a little crazy going zombie mode with lack of sleep due to the new infant, so I had to hit the old reset button, get a shower, a shave, and a haircut, get off all those baby spit up clothes, and get back in the saddle and give you guys the quality you deserve. In case you didn't notice, last week we didn't have an episode because life is becoming hectic with the newborn. So just to give you a heads up, it's possible that we may miss some more Ask Bobbies in the future. I try not to, but life sometimes gets a little busy. That's just life, right? Don't worry though, your Friday content, GM screens, interviews, and other Diary of a Game Master stuff that comes out on Fridays, that will continue to happen on a weekly basis. I will not let you down in that department, folks. Let's just jump right into Ask Bobby, the segment where I answer your pressing questions because, you know, I'm an expert in things, right? Our first question comes from Patreon. He asks, I've got a question for you concerning RCC and device modifications provided in data trails. I'm not sure if an RCC is considered like some kind of deck or commlink regarding using programs or apps. Can you put a stealth dongle on it and hack on the fly? Rigger command consoles, RCCs. Riggers use those to basically interact with their drones and control multiple arrays of drones all at once. The RCC to the rigger is kind of like the cyberdeck to the decker. It's his core piece of equipment that allows him to do the special thing that he can do. So the question here really is, how can we look at RCCs in terms of the add-ons that can be added to them, specifically commlink dongles that are referenced in data trails on page 61. Now, they're called commlink dongles, so at first blush you might think, well, of course they're not going to go on an RCC. They're intended to go on commlinks. And I tend to agree with that. However, there is a debate among the Shadowrun community. You see, there's some language in the core rulebook that kind of implies that an RCC might be considered very, very similar to a commlink in many, many ways. And this is kind of the source of the debate in the community. If an RCC can be thought of as a commlink, then couldn't you put commlink dongles on it? In my games, I've always said no to allowing RCCs to have dongles be put in them. The reason is I think that doing this opens up the possibility of a lot of exploitation. Specifically, it allows RCCs to be built in such a way that they could do just as much as, if not more, than equivalent cyberdecks, but for a lot cheaper. So why would a decker ever get a cyberdeck when they could just, jury rig and hack together an RCC for sometimes tens or hundreds of thousands of new yen cheaper? In fact, another poster on the Shadowrun tabletop forums, Herr Brockhaus, illustrated using specific examples how you can use an RCC to create a functionally equivalent cyberdeck, one of the top cyberdecks that are out there, for over 100,000 new yen cheaper. And so again, that's why I don't like the way that people want to do that. And really it makes sense if you think about it. These commlink dongles are intended to elevate a commlink to the point of making them more versatile and give you a little bit more on the edge sort of versatility to get things done in a pinch. Thanks for the question, Jordan. The next question we've got is from YouTuber Vertimu, who asks, I've got a question regarding host design. I think it's relatively easy to imagine what a building in the Sixth World might look like, but I'm having a hard time deciding what the inside of a host might look like. Not just in terms of aesthetics, but rather in what goes where. How many hoops does the decker have to jump through before being able to access a camera or all the cameras? Where would security relevant files be located? Could you just find and then proceed to access them after like a single matrix perception test? Well, Vertimu, for the longest time, the realm of host architecture, what it looks like, the aesthetics, and even the way everything is organized has always been up to the imagination of the GM. And that's fine. You come up with your own idea of how you think things look. But with the release of Data Trails, the Matrix source book, we actually have a much more detailed description of the way hosts look and feel and operate in the Sixth World of Shadowrun. There's a specific chapter that starts on page 82 of Data Trails. It's called The Perfect Host. And this chapter again, details how hosts operate, how they work, and what they do, what they're for. The great part about this chapter that really goes to answer your question is this chapter is peppered throughout with little sidebar examples describing actual hosts that are in the Shadowrun world. I think the first example is the Seattle Metroplex Administrative Host, so the local Seattle City government host, and it describes what it looks like. So it's a really cool description. It talks about how when you go into it, all the walls and banisters and everything's ornate, and there's gold and ivory all over the place inside this host, and it's set up to look like black marble on the floors and walls and pillars, and there's all sorts of decorations that are made of green crystalline structures that is supposed to be reminiscent of the Emerald City that is Seattle. Now, it even describes how data is represented in the host. There's little blue floating glowing dots that when you interact with it expands into a projected image of what the data is on that file. There are lots of different examples of different types of hosts. Read through those and it'll give you lots of inspiration. Finally, to wrap up this question, you did ask about being connected to cameras and stuff like that. I have just recently released a GM screen video on the basics of hacking hosts. It is the very, very basics, but you might want to check that here. It talks about how you're connected to all devices whenever you're inside a host, and it talks about a couple of other little things, basic understanding of how hosts are hacked and why you might want to do that. So check it out. Next question is from YouTuber Pocket Pear, who spells it like Leet speak with 3's as the E's. I like it. Pocket Pear asks, I've got a question. I'd love to hear your take on how you feel about player character death in Shadowrun. And what do you think about being able to constantly burn edge to stay alive? I used to kind of be on the fence about player character death and feel a little squeamish about it. I used to think, I don't want to kill my players. Are they going to hate me if I kill them? All sorts of stuff like that. And I would be really easy on them, almost unintentionally, because I was kind of like shying away from that, giving them super hard threats to make them fail and die. Well, recently I did an interview with the Arcology podcast, and Mr. Johnson, he taught me that we should never be afraid to kill our player characters. And the reason is because of the edge that you mentioned, Pocket Pear. Edge in Shadowrun now, the way it's turned into, it gives us the freedom as GMs to really challenge our players with really difficult challenges, because in a lot of ways, your players are only going to die if they want to die, because they can burn a point of edge to stay alive. Now, the question is this a good thing? A lot of people argue that this cheapens the threat in Shadowrun, that things just aren't as real, aren't as deadly, and don't feel as threatening because, well, if you're gonna die, you just burn a point of edge and stay alive. I actually take issue with this because even if a player burns a point of edge to stay alive, their character is still very, very damaged and has suffered quite a bit. When you burn a point of edge, it doesn't just like negate everything that happened to you. The rules state that the burned point of edge keeps your character alive in a situation that would have otherwise killed them. However, they still have the deadly damage. They still need medical attention, and they still have the fallouts of that. There could be permanent limb damage, and I think the book even encourages you to do things like that. So it's still really bad to take this deadly damage, not to mention the fact that you just burnt a point of edge permanently that you won't be able to use in the future. So to more directly answer your question, I think the situation of PC death in Shadowrun is fine the way it is. I like the fact that I can't accidentally kill my characters when maybe I don't intend to. I just want to give them a challenge. I don't want to kill them per se. And I like that players actually feel the freedom to do more daring, exciting things in a situation where they can burn a point of edge to make sure that they don't have to lose and throw their character sheet away. The final question is from YouTuber Big Slam 1993. He asks, hey, Bobby, I got another legwork question for you. How do I get my players to do it? Maybe it's because my games tend to be more on the pink and mohawky side, but that doesn't excuse doing absolutely no legwork. So if you're in a situation where you want your players to do something, to behave a certain way, and they're not already doing that, and this can apply to anything, not just legwork, then you need to put them in a situation where they're sort of forced to do it, and then, and this is important, reward them for doing that thing. It's basic conditioning, guys. You gotta treat your players like Pavlov's dog, okay? So, in the situation of legwork, put them in a scenario or a run where legwork is practically required. So give them a MacGuffin, make it so that they have to find a person or a thing or assassinate somebody, do some wet work, but they're given almost no information at all. Maybe they're only given a tiny, tiny piece of a breadcrumb, and there's no way that they can accomplish their goal without doing legwork. They will be forced to do it. And when they do it, you make sure you reward them. Like, make it really easy for them to accomplish their goal. Easier than normal because they did legwork. This will send the message home that, hey, if we do a little prep work, a little legwork, if we walk around and ask some questions of people, maybe things will be a little bit easier. One of the easiest way to do this is to give your players an investigation scenario. It inherently has legwork built in. You can check out a video that I did on how to run investigation scenarios here. The other way to do this, and this may sound controversial or a surprise to all sorts of people, but sit down and talk to your players about it. I mean, I think that too often there's this wall that we put between players and GMs, right? This wall that they can't talk to each other, that they are somehow inherently at odds with each other and you're just fighting with each other. It's not true, guys. We're all playing the same game and we all want to have fun. So if you want to do something, talk to people about it out of character, out of game. Just say, hey, I think it would be more fun for me if you guys did a little bit more legwork. I get to plan all this stuff and do a little bit more role play. So why don't you guys do that? Stop staying on opposite sides of the table here and we can just reach across and help each other out. Our games are going to be a lot more fun. Talk to each other. So that's the show for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the answers. I always love getting questions from you guys and answering them. I want to hear from you guys in the comments about what your answers to these questions are, especially this last one about how to get your players to do legwork or really anything that they're not doing. How do you encourage people to go in a certain direction and whatnot? If you liked what you saw here, then go ahead and click the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. Send it on over to people. Share it with your friends. Let them know about my channel here. I love getting the message out to people. And until next time, bye-bye. Hey, this show and everything we do on Complex Action is made possible by the generous contributions of our patrons over at patreon.com. So head on over to patreon.com/complexaction, and if you like what you see here, consider becoming a patron. Every little bit of support we get goes a long way to help us out. And you get cool thank you rewards, like, for example, having your questions get priority to be answered on this segment. Any patron who answers a question gets their questions answered first on the Ask Bobby segment. So head on over, patreon.com/complexaction, and thanks a bunch. Bye-bye.